What's up, everybody? On today's video, we are going to listen to James Crumbley's jail calls where he threatens Oakland County prosecutor that prosecuted his case, convicted him, argued for the max in sentencing, and got it. Everybody knows jail calls are recorded. That's why we get to listen to them here. But how were they used in the pretrial process, during the trial, and most importantly, during sentencing for James Crumbley? So that's what we're going to focus on today. Make sure you guys get your questions in the comments and hit that like button. So we heard about these jail calls during the trial. They happened sometime before the trial, and we know that the state has people reviewing jail calls at all times, especially in high-profile cases like this. James Crumbley very clearly knows these are recorded and will be used against him, but I'm not sure he understood the full effect of how they would be used against him and how they would be mentioned multiple times post-jail call. Now, they weren't brought into evidence. They didn't go in front of a jury. And you can tell he seems very confident that he's going to be out of here soon. But if and when he was wrong, it comes back to bite him. There's really no arguing it. I understand, and we've talked about how people get very upset, very angry when they feel like they've been wrongfully accused, wrongfully charged, wrongfully tried, and now wrongfully convicted. I get it. And there are ways to fight that, to disagree with that, and even to really dislike the prosecutor or people involved that are decision makers on your case. But to make threats usually doesn't go well, especially when you're not the ultimate decision maker, but instead that is left to a judge, or in this case, a jury. So let's take a listen now to these jail calls together.
3 months from now, I'm going down.
By the way, the bleeps are curse words, but also I think some people's names.
I mean, it's going down. When I get out of here, I am on a rampage, Karen. Yes, Karen McDonald, your is going down, and you better be scared. Can't even just.
When I get out of here, I'm going on a rampage. Yes, Karen McDonald, you're going down. A lot of expletives in there. Actually, it might not be names, just be maybe explicit names he has for Karen McDonald. So threatening to take her down or ruin her career is one thing, but go on a rampage to take her down, I can actually understand how they start to see these threats rising to levels that are problematic and potentially criminal on their own. Threatening elected prosecutors is a no-no. We've actually represented people that have done some very stupid threats to government officials or prosecutors for decisions they've made for things that have nothing to do with them, but they write letters threatening them and doing things. And there are very serious criminal charges that can come from making threats like this. Now, to this point, we haven't seen any charges come. Will that change in the future? I don't know.
Discuss it on the phone, because then I give away stuff to you.
Right.
Dumb Karen McDonald.
He says he can't even mention all of it on the phone because some of it's secret, that he has stuff in the background that he can bring up against Karen McDonald. Now, listen, is that possible? Sure. But these threats, they do not show a very remorseful man. Instead, they show a very confident man with vengeance on the mind.
They can listen. They can
By the way, he's talking to his sister.
listen to my phone calls all they want. They can listen to my phone calls all they want. I don't give a shit.
I know.
So he knows that these calls are recorded, and not just that they're recorded, but that the state listens to them.
Jeez.
But anyways, all her lies are unraveling, and they will continue to unravel, and she will continue to fall until she's.
God forbid one of her kids put her in some kind of position. Kind of.
So a couple interesting things there. All of her lies are starting to unravel. Okay. But then God forbid her kids put her in a crappy situation. I don't get that. There are things I don't get. Maybe you guys can add context to it that have been following the case closely over the years and all of the pretrial effects, but I'm not sure what they're going with there, but they're saying, karma's going to come back and get her. Oh, okay. I put it together. So they're saying, God forbid her kid commits a crime And then this comes back to bite her, and they charge her for something her kid did. Okay. I thought they were talking about politically or with her career or with her job and things like that. But instead, they're basically saying, which a lot of people have said, this could happen to you. This could happen to anybody. So it makes me think potentially that there were some conversations between the defense attorneys and the prosecutor about how can you really charge this? This could literally happen to you. And they're hoping it does happen to her. Now, are those threats? No. While that's sad, and I hope that never happens, and I hope her kid never does anything like that, and it doesn't come back on her. I would never hope that on anybody. This is a more realistic and appropriate's not the right word, conversation that I've seen people had about prosecutors and people they're ticked at that have charged them with crimes and are prosecuting them. Like, I hope this happens to you. I hope you know what I'm going through. I had no control over my kid. You have no control over yours. I hope this happens to you with your kid too. Those are more appropriate. That's not him going on a rampage to take her down and ruin her, right? Those are different threats. We also heard things like this in the Parkland shooter trial. So it's really not unusual, especially in these situations, for people to hope the same thing happens to the person they think is at fault or the person they hate in that moment. Horrible. I don't love to see it, but this is more understandable of the threats I've heard in cases like this.
Well, she's going to be sucking on a hot rock down in hell soon. Going to drive me insane in this place and locked up cage for no reason and freaking Karen McDonald, you're when I get out. Yeah, Karen McDonald, you're going down. Yeah, you stupid.
So she's going to be in hell soon. She locked me in this cage. Again, that's anger coming out. She's going to be in hell soon to me is, I guess you could take it as a threat if you think he's going to physically do something to put her there. But again, the rampage to bring her down, that stuff in the beginning was the most threatening that I could understand being physical. A lot of this is just an angry guy who's literally in jail for multiple years waiting for his trial, now convicted. You can understand how pissed off he is.
Jail. Go ahead. Record this call. Send it to Karen McDonald.
Stop it.
Tell her how.
Go ahead. Record this call. Send it to Karen McDonald. So this is not some invasion of privacy. This is not some, he thought he was having a private conversation, or let's give him the benefit of the doubt. It's almost like he wanted her to hear them, which again comes into threats, because if I just text my wife a threat to somebody, is it a real threat? They don't even know about it. I think I could argue like they didn't know about it. They weren't really reasonably in fear. But in this case, he knew she was going to hear it, said it anyways, continued to say it, almost taunted her in these recordings.
How James Crumbley's going to take her down. She will not have a law license when I get done with her. And like I said earlier, Karen McDonald will be working at McDonald's because she ain't going to be able to get a job anywhere else.
Okay, so those threats, again, while nasty, are going after her career because he thinks she's abused power and done a bad job at her career and things like that. Okay, a little bit different. Also, when it comes to threats and harassment and physical threats or threats of physical violence, in order for you to be in reasonable fear, they have to be able to carry it out. Obviously, a guy that's in jail is not going to reasonably be able to carry these things out. So there's all sorts of elements to this. I know the answer is always, it depends from a lawyer. I get it, but this is not good. This is not good. And it's definitely not good for your case.
None of this should have happened. None of it should have happened.
I know it shouldn't have happened.
Well, some may agree that it shouldn't have happened at you and your wife's fault, including the jury.
I know.
You know, and they're trying to blame it all on us. They're trying to say none of it should have happened because of you. When we it's just so ridiculous. It wasn't us. It wasn't us. It was the school.
Right.
So again, the better argument is it wasn't us, it was Ethan. It wasn't us, it was Ethan, our son. But no, they say it wasn't us, it was the school. And obviously we've heard a lot of people think it was the school's fault, the victims, prosecutors, maybe even the defendants, but also a lot of people think it was the parents' fault. And I actually think I can see arguments for both sides, but I also see how there's some similarities and comparisons to what the school failed to do and what the parents failed to do. So if they're so hard to push that it's the school's fault and what they failed to do, and it's totally ridiculous that anybody would think it was the parents' fault, is really interesting. And if I were, in their shoes or anything, I would be pointing the finger at the shooter and focus on the shooter and the shooter's actions, and nobody was going to stop him because nobody would have ever thought it was him. Multiple people said that they would have never thought it was him. But they continue to point the finger at the school, which would also be a negligent aspect of this, which it's always, in my opinion, the better legal argument is to be like, no negligence should come into this. It was an intentional act by a horrible monster. And kind of like the arguments that were made in the resource officers trial with Mark Eiglarsh and Scott Peterson against the Parkland shooter, it was this monster's fault. Nobody's negligent acts caused this. But that's not what they went with here.
Yeah.
Fucking stupid. Yeah, you here at McDonald's, you're stupid. I hope you're listening to this. It's really ridiculous. I'm getting sick of it. But it's like I told you. I mean, we're
By the way, the reason the tones change is these are multiple calls clipped together.
we're martyrs, without the whole dying aspect of it, because I don't know what better word to use. So I used the word martyr. But we're martyrs to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else in America again. To make sure that nobody like that dumb, stupid here in McDonald's, that ignorant.
Call will be terminated in 1 minute.
So he says they're martyrs without the dying aspect, but I mean, they're going to prison for a long time. And it's just to make sure that this never happens to anybody else. Well, and I've made my issues with the legalities of this and charging them with this and the precedent it could set and the ripple effect that could come. And, I think we should be worried about that. I think that's something that should still be an open discussion, even after their conviction, to make sure that this doesn't go too far and wide reaching. I think there is a risk of that. But I also understand from the perspective of criminal law and prosecutions, and when people break the law and when bad things happen, a part of that is to deter future similar action and to punish the bad actors. So to say that, they're doing this to us because they never want it to happen again, I think he's right. Did they take it too far with what they charged, with the sentences they asked for? Maybe certain things like that, but he's basically talking about one of the points of criminal prosecutions in our case, in the criminal justice system, in our country, I should say.
Obviously, uneducated, ignorant, district attorney can do something like this to somebody else ever again. I mean, it's just.
So again, I think there are shots you can take. Maybe if you want to say political or seeking her own career advancements or whatever. And I'm not saying she's doing that, but those are some claims I think you could make that people could say, okay, whatever. But to call her uneducated, I think is kind of a weird shot.
It's just ridiculous. So, we're going to fight the good battle for everybody else. It's like, I feel like I joined the military and I'm going to fight for my country. I kind of am. I'm fighting for everybody else's freedom.
So while they're making him a martyr, or I guess he's kind of trying to make himself a martyr, they're trying to make him an example. There's all sorts of big overarching themes to this case and these charges. And I think we've seen it and heard it from both sides. We've seen it and heard it from the victims and the prosecutors, how they say they're not really doing that. It's a very specific case, but then sometimes what they say and what they argue, it really seems like they're trying to make an example out of them and to try to maybe push certain agendas. And then on his side, he's saying, well, he's a martyr. He has to go fight for his side, pushing an agenda, trying to rally everybody that might be on the opposite side of where the prosecutor is. And they're almost bringing politics or different agendas into this from both sides. Just really interesting to me that these jail calls kind of pull the curtain back on, because we didn't hear him take the stand.
Well, we have to, because the thing is that, I kind of feel like a martyr, you know what I mean? Because, or matra, or whatever, however you want to pronounce it.
A martyr.
Yeah. If they allow this stupid to do to us what she's trying to do based upon, nothing. I mean, we don't, there's no, here's the thing. She never did, they never did any type of investigation before they charged us.
They never did any type of investigation before they charged them. I'm not so sure about that. Seems like they did do an investigation. They did have a lot, but they did get a lot more after charging, which happens in a lot of cases. Now, that still leaves the discussion open as to should it happen like this? Should this be the law? Is this really what we want? The dangers of the ripple effect and precedent setting things. So I understand that, and I'm not trying to put down that discussion at all. But let's talk real quick about how this, and there was obviously a lot more, but I thought this was a really good synopsis to not have a 3-hour video going through jail calls. But how does this affect the case at the 3 stages? And at the pre-trial phase, it's pretty obvious. If the prosecutors were ever going to make a plea deal offer, it's probably not going to be a very good one when you hear the defendant talking about you like this. And while lawyers and prosecutors and judges are supposed to be fair and impartial and keep all this stuff out, I should say, it's really hard when you hear him saying things like he's saying about Karen McDonald here. So I do think that this could have affected the leniency or potentially offering either of them the opportunity to flip on the other, or what type of plea deals they may have been offered, or charged with maybe something lesser than what they were actually charged with. I do think this had an effect on that. And then if we talk about the trial, well, the prosecutors kind of tried to bring this up, and they did mention it in front of the world when he was on trial, when the public was watching, the media was watching. Hopefully no jurors or people that were talking to jurors were watching, but there's always the chance of that. And it came out that he made threatening phone calls. We didn't get the details, but we absolutely knew very quickly when they announced what was going on in kind of a coy manner, and they figured it out back, and they came with an agreement, and they figured it all out, and they weren't going to use them at trial. But we, the world and the public, knew threatening phone calls were made. And that can kind of color the way the public follows the case. It can color some of the media attention, and again, help the prosecutor, hurt the criminal defendant. And lastly, and most importantly, in my opinion, because it was actually mentioned by the prosecutor and I think ratified by the judge, that his lack of remorse, his anger, his vengeance in these phone calls, the threats that he made, showed his true self and character, not necessarily the reasonably or decently nicer version of him that he read his statement in front of court at sentencing. We know the court already had kind of where they were going to sentence them already written down. We knew they already had this information and already reviewed this information. I absolutely think this was taken into account when the court was deciding whether or not to have leniency, go to the guidelines, go to the recommendations, or hammer them with the max, which was requested by the state, and understanding why the state asked for the max, at least in small part, to these jail calls. And I think these jail calls were absolutely factored in when giving James Crumbley the max sentence. Maybe even Jennifer too, because maybe the judge was just thinking, I'm going to give him the same sentence and the same penalty. So I think these jail calls can have a profound effect, even if they're not used as evidence at trial, because we are people, lawyers and judges. We have emotions. We try to put them aside. But as you know, there's like implicit bias and things you can't get over when you really start to dislike somebody and you feel their hatred towards you. You're going to hammer them with everything you got legally and within your power and reason. And that's what she did here. She hammered him with the heaviest penalty, the heaviest crime, the heaviest charge, the heaviest recommendations she possibly could. And that's what ended up carrying the day with the convictions and the sentence. So let me know what you guys think. What did you learn from these jail calls and how they affect the process? Where am I off? Where am I right? Where do you agree with me? Where they were used in the pretrial, trial, or sentencing process? Because I do think they made a difference. And I think this was a part of the case that we don't have in every case like this. Either defendants are smarter and they're not saying it when they're being recorded, or they don't quite have the same feelings that James Crumbley had in this case. Can't wait to read the comments. Thanks for hanging out with me for a little bit tonight. But until next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.